So I'm trying something a little bit different this month because I want to try doing a mid-month wrap-up, or a mid-month check-in. That's what I want to call it. If you've watched my channel at all before, you may know that I've tried a few different formats for reading wrap-ups at the end of the month. I've done a kind of typical sit-down, or rather stand up, I always stand in front of my camera, but a sit-down wrap-up where I have like a list of everything I've read in the month. And then I've also tried a vlog style wrap-up where I'm filming clips as I'm reading the books or as I'm finishing them. So I wanted to try doing a mid-month check-in this month to see if kind of giving myself a point to talk about the things I've talked about point to talk about the things I've read in the first 2 weeks. If that gives me a little bit more coherent thoughts here at this point and then again at the end of the month, and allows me to, I think, you know, just basically make a better review video, right? Like, that's what I'm constantly aiming at, is making these reviews more coherent, more helpful, that kind of thing. So we're going to try it this month and see how this works out. I've seen several other people doing it this way, and I just wanted to see if this will work out for me. So the plan for today is I'm going to talk about the books that I've already read, briefly cover the stuff that I'm currently reading, and then also touch on things that I think I might read next. So talking about the books I've already read, the first thing I read this month was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I listened to this one as an audiobook because I have been doing a lot of really tedious work at work. I'm a graduate assistant in the graduate school at my university, so right now we're getting ready for graduation. I know it seems early because, you know, it's the beginning of a semester. We have this list of people who have applied to graduate, and I'm like doing stuff that involves checking to make sure their diploma names are correct, that they match their names on file, that they're not like misspelled, and that their mailing addresses are correct and stuff like that. So it's a lot of like tedious work that's not very hard to do, but it is a little bit mind-numbing if you don't have something else going on. So I listened to Home Before Dark while I was working on that kind of stuff, and I find that Riley Sager's books are, for me, very crunchy. They're what I and my friend would call potato chip books. They're fun, they're easy, they're delicious at the time, and then they're not very nutritious, but it's fine because you had a good time, right? The other end of the spectrum that we talk about is chewy books, things that are more like steak, where you have to take your time to consume them and to process them afterwards. But Riley Sager's books are very much potato chip books. They're very crunchy, very easy to read while I'm doing other things, so I really like listening to his books as audiobooks. In fact, it's the only way I've consumed any of his books. So this is the third one I've read, and it's, I think, ranks in the middle for me of the ones I've read so far. I give this 3.5 stars, and I think that this is a really spooky book. It does a really good job of building atmosphere. If you're not aware, Home Before Dark is a haunted house story. This follows Maggie, who, when she was 5, her family fled this house that they lived in for about 20 days, and her father wrote this book about how the house was haunted. 25 years later, Maggie has never believed what's in the book because she doesn't remember any of it. And so she's like, this can't possibly have been what happened, because you would think that if things that he wrote about happened, I would be quite traumatized by them. I would probably remember them. That's kind of her thinking on that. And she decides, after her father's death, to go back to the house and see if she can figure out what actually happened and why he wrote this book in the first place. And you're following her as she's kind of this skeptic very early on, doesn't really believe in ghosts, kind of gets there and starts interacting with people involved in the house, like the caretaker, the woman who was previously like the house cleaner there, and her children, the cop who interviewed her father right after they fled. So lots of things like that, where she's interacting with people and just kind of getting to know this old house. She's also a contractor, so that's the other part of it, is that she's there under the guise of getting ready to flip the house and sell it. And as the book goes on, creepier things happen, and we start to see Maggie's belief in, like, this idea that the book can't possibly be real start to waver a little bit. So I thought this was really interesting. It was very fun to read. It was very spooky. I thought that the atmosphere was really well done. It also follows an interesting dual timeline structure where you're getting alternating chapters of her father's book along with Maggie's investigations into the events of each of those chapters of the book to kind of like figure out what actually happened. So I thought that was an interesting structure. I enjoyed the interplay between those two timelines. I thought that was really fun, and I just overall really enjoyed this book. My least favorite part of this book is the ending. I think that it requires a little too much suspension of disbelief. It doesn't totally tie everything together in a satisfying way. I think it's too many like small twists that are all kind of like, you have the kind of the ending, which is made up of like a series of smaller twists, and some of them I was okay with. Some of them, like, I think there was just like too many twists directly in a row, and they weren't all convincing. So I think that the ending is the weakest part of this book. But up until that point, I was really enjoying it. It was very fun to listen to. And there was a scene with snakes and coffee that made me genuinely like gag and then turn off the book for a little bit because I just couldn't listen to it right then. It freaked me out really badly. So on the whole, enjoyable, fun. Recommend if you're looking for something light and easy to get to, especially if you're wanting an audiobook to listen to. I thought the narrators both did a really great job. I'd recommend it. I think it's fun, and I am looking forward to Riley Sager's new release later in the year. The other book that I've read is Frankenstein. This is the 1818 version, which I had not read before, but this story as a whole is a reread for me. I read the 1831 version several years ago for high school, and so this was revisiting the story but in a slightly different version of it. And I really enjoyed this. I thought this was really great as a reread. Like, I loved it just as much the second time around. Frankenstein's one of my favorite classics, so it was just like a good time to get to reread it. And I did a video about my annotating process for this, so I'll link that up in the right hand corner and in the description down below. But I did like annotate this book because I read it for class, and I'm going to be, hopefully, if I can get the topic kind of worked out, I'm going to be writing a paper on this one. So I just really enjoyed my reread, and this is a classic that I highly recommend if you're kind of intimidated by classics or if you're wanting to get into them and you just don't know where to start. I think that Frankenstein's a good place to start because it is fun. It's quite sad at some points, but mostly it is fun, it is spooky, it is a gothic story. It's also like the very first sci-fi book, and it's just really well done, and I love it so much. So highly recommend as a place to start because I think it's not intimidating. It's really pretty easy to get through, and also it's really short. Like, this book looks thick, but the actual text of Frankenstein is only, there we go. The actual book is only that much of this edition. This has a bunch of appendices with additional content and so like a literary introduction or an academic introduction and then that kind of stuff because it's an academic version. But this is really about like 160, 170 pages, so I think that it's pretty quick and easy to get through, and I highly recommend it. Those are all the things I finished. The stuff that I'm currently reading, my main read at the moment is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I've gotten this from the library literally 4 times so far this year, and I'm still reading it. I'm at a point where I'm thinking I might just go buy myself a copy because I am really enjoying it. I'm about 100 pages in, and I'm really invested in these characters, and I'm really interested to see where the story is going to go from here. But this is a really weird book to talk about because there is no plot to speak of. It's so far, 100 pages in, is all character work, it's all backstory, it's all setting up where are these characters at in their lives now, how did they get here, what are their motivations. And so I'm enjoying it, but it is just like a strange experience. It's kind of slow paced, and so it's causing me to take some time to read it, on top of the fact that I've been struggling to prioritize any kind of leisure reading around my school reading. I'm thinking I might have to buy a copy because this is literally the 4th time I've had it from the library, and I just have not been making quick progress through it, and now it's due on Friday. It's currently Monday. So I have about 4 days to read 400 more pages. So I just don't know that that's going to happen on that timeline. The other thing I'm currently reading on ebook is The Twyford Code by Janice Hallett. This one's been kind of backburnered, but I'm hoping that once I get through The Blade Itself, I can kind of come back to it and finish it. This is her 2nd book, and I was really excited for this one, and it's just not working for me as well as The Appeal did. I loved The Appeal last year. This one, somehow the mixed media format for this one just isn't working for me. It's interesting, like I like Smithy as a character, I think he's fun to follow, but I just don't get the transcript format. I don't think it's really adding anything at this point over, like, say, having it as a journal, other than the kind of, I guess there's a thematic element with this phone where Smithy as an ex-con is trying to reintegrate into society, and he's struggling because he's spent so many years in prison and he's having to like learn new technology and just learn how to be a part of the, you know, the citizen population again. And I think that's interesting, so I kind of get it, but it's just not totally working for me. The last thing I'm currently reading, I forgot to bring in here with me, but I have the Dust Jacket. So I'm currently reading She Who Became the Sun. I've been reading this for a long time, but not because I don't like it. It's actually because I love this book, and I am, 1, not wanting to try and like rush through it around my school stuff. 2, I'm scared of what's going to happen to the characters because I'm really invested in them. I really like the characters here. And 3, I am afraid if I pick it up, I will power through it and not get anything else done, and I can't afford to do that right now. The last couple things I have to mention are the things that I'm hoping I'll read next. One of these is The Deep by River Solomon. I'm kind of waiting on the audiobook to come in at my library because I think that this is the way I want to consume this book. I listened to the audiobook the first time I tried to read this. I was in a big slump and I ended up setting it aside so that I could give the book a fair chance at a later date when I was actually in the mood to read. And I really was liking the audiobook. It's really well done. River Solomon's writing is beautiful and complex, and I really enjoy that. And then Daveed Diggs narrates the audiobook, and he was doing a fantastic job. And then the other couple of things I need to read are from my TBR Betrayal list, because it would be cool to actually like finish a TBR for once. I almost never do. But my last three things, I keep forgetting one. My last three things are Persuasion, which I'm going to be reading for the same class that I read Frankenstein for, and I'll probably be starting this afternoon because I need to read this for next week. I need to read like the first 9 chapters, I think. And then the other two, which are not for class, that came up for TBR Betrayal, are Dracula by Bram Stoker and Signed Here by Claudia Lux. So I'm hopeful that I can get to these at some point, but I'm not sure whether I'm actually going to get to them or not. It's kind of going to depend on how quickly I get through Blade itself and Twyford Code and Persuasion, primarily. I'm not as worried about She Who Became the Sun because obviously it's a book that I own. I have it on my shelf. I can kind of read it whenever, and it's not for school, so there's no deadline on it. So yeah, those are the things I'm hopeful I can read going forward. And that is pretty much it, I think. So let me know down in the comments how you feel about a mid-month wrap-up from me or a mid-month check-in. And also let me know what your favorite book you've read so far this month is. I would love to hear what you're reading at the moment and what you're enjoying. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and if you have, I hope you'll consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting every Tuesday and Saturday, so there is more content coming soon, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.